Welcome to Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your MC, Rach, and I'm joined today by my co-MCs...
Rich?
Mark?
Mad J?
That's right. This is something altogether different for 2021. We're trying a whole new style of episode. We've invited on a couple of experts in the Powered by the Apocalypse gaming field. We have Mad J Brown, who's a freelance writer, host of the Diceology podcast, which you totally should check out, and GM for Hire, or I guess for this might be MC for Hire. How you doing, Mad J?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Rich?
It's really good.
Also joining us today is Mark D.S. Truman, co-founder of Magpie Games, founding member of the Indie Game Developer Network, co-creator/creator of Urban Shadows, Zombie World, Root the RPG, and Cartel. Rich also had the notes that you may have won some Ennies over the last few years, right?
Yes, I suppose I won some Ennies. That's good. Yeah, hello, Rach. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming and joining us. Hey, Rich, so what is our thesis statement of this new format of episode?
Thesis statement is this. We want to do another round with some of these foundational Powered by the Apocalypse games with a different lens. This will be a roundtable discussion, so it may be a little messy, maybe some people talking over each other. We're building the plane as we fly it. But the idea behind this is to take a deeper dive into a particular Apocalypse engine game. And so we asked Mark and Mad J if they would come on and help us dig deep into the original Apocalypse world. Now, there are 3 iterations, so just so we define our terms, we will be talking about Apocalypse World 2nd Edition. We know that there's a newer hack version of the game. We'll talk about that kind of on the back end a little bit in our closing statements. But for now, we're focusing on that hardcover or softcover or PDF that you can get, Apocalypse World 2nd Edition, from D. Vincent Baker and Meguey Baker. Originally, 1st edition 2010 started the whole Apocalypse engine. 2016 is when the 2nd edition was published. Rach, are there any content warnings we should throw to people? Just make sure.
For content warnings in this sub-series, I'd like to point out that we are going to stick with problematic content that is directly on the surface of the game. We aren't going to focus on what could be, but what's directly in the game text. Rich, you bring up an excellent point about something that catches people off guard about Apocalypse World.
Sex moves.
Sex is in this
There's
game.
mechanics for sex and things that happen when, we don't talk about the dirty, the nitty gritty, but when people have sex, a move happens and it changes the fiction, but it's talking about sex, people. Sexual relations.
Yeah, there are those. I think it's interesting because they're not called sex moves, right? They're specials.
They're specials.
Specials.
Right,
we all call them
specials.
sex moves, though.
Right,
we do.
right.
No, you're
We do.
right.
Well, that's Monster Hearts, isn't it? Monster Hearts informed that name.
It was there before Monster Hearts, I think. I think everybody knows them as sex moves, but like the Hocus is special is if you and another character have sex, you each hold one, and then you can spend the hold, right? I mean, it's not like, well, tell me what you do and I'll tell you what you get. It's like, hey, you had sex, we all saw it, that we faded to black. Now,
We all saw it. Wait, oh no.
I have horror stories. Some games don't fade to black.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. But like the outcomes are very focused around like the relationship between you and this other character has changed.
Right.
So we're going to reflect that in the fiction.
Should also be noted that violence is a very big part of this game. There's a lot of mechanics that play around with violence. If you are more sensitive to harsh language, the book is full of cursing. Just laying it out there. The book is not your friend in some cases.
Yeah, there's a whole section called Advanced Fuckery in the book.
Right.
That's in there. And you should read it, yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Right on. Right on.
Do either of our guests have any content warnings they'd like to flag for listeners who might not have played Apocalypse World yet?
I feel like the game creates or pushes adult situations, right? And I don't know if that's worthy of a content warning or not. But I think if you play the game and you cut out the sex moves and you tone back the violence, I think you still get very adult situations.
I think ultimately it's a game about what happens when society doesn't have rules anymore. And so you're constantly dealing with adult judgments without the structure for those judgments. And that sounds so boring, but it's awesome because Rat Guy is not doing his job. What do you do? There are other games like Dungeon World or Masks that I would run for kids, and I could actually get down to a kid level and have all the violence be cheeky and fun and not tragic and cruel. But Apocalypse World is going to have some hint of tragic and cruel kind of no matter what you do.
For the players.
Let's talk about playing Apocalypse World.
Yeah. You're a player, you're sitting down to play your first game of Apocalypse World. There are a ton of playbooks laid out in front of you. Overwhelming amounts of playbooks, depending on how cruel your MC is feeling.
Favorite playbooks.
Everyone, what playbook would you reach to first, or tell your friend, hey, check out that one?
Matt J, what about you?
Man, so I'm mad because I want to play the Operator, and they dropped that out of the 2nd edition. So I have to fall back and play the Driver. Unless the Quarantine is in play, then I would play the Quarantine.
Good choices.
Right? I like characters that easily get in over their head, that rely on pushing their luck. And when that fails, I want the MC to come back with something interesting for me. I'm begging for, give me something interesting, right? Something hard. That's what I'm here to play. So for me, in order, it's the Operator, Driver, then Quarantine that does that for me. I love that.
Dude. It's so funny because I'm like, I love that people in over their head as a GM, but like as a player, I think maybe I'm not good at it. So like for me, I'm the Maestro D. Like, and I'm on the opposite of you in that like I love that it got added. It's now core, right? Because this idea. Yeah. So the Maestro D
wasn't.
Yeah, Maestro D is somebody who owns like a bar or a place people come to hang out and gamble or whatever, right? It's like an establishment. And I love that shit. Like, oh man, like people come into my bar and like dealing with all the problems that come with it. And it almost always gets another PC involved too. Like somebody's working security or somebody's here all the time. And ironically for me as a designer, like 70% of Cartel is based around this playbook. The Maestro D's thing, like, it's because everybody's got different things, right? Like, and this is really fun because if you haven't played Apocalypse World before, you might be used to the fighter and the cleric having different things, but they're like, I hit things and I do spells. Well, in Apocalypse World, the thing is like, I have a really cool car, and that changes the game. Now the game's happening in cars or whatever, right? So the Maestro D's thing is just asking questions about your cool place. Who's your regulars? Who owes you money? Who comes all the time that you fucking hate? Like, and when I did Cartel, I was like, oh, that's all we need to do. Oh, you work for the Anti-Cartel Task Force. Tell me about your partner. Tell me about your boss. Okay, done. Let's have a game. And like the idea that you could just ask people questions and get answers and then play based on those answers, like my little White Wolf brain just melted and blood ran out of my ears. Like, what? But it works so good. And so for me, the Maestro, that's it. That's my favorite playbook.
What about you, Rach?
Out of the core book playbooks for 2nd edition, because I too have a very soft spot for Quarantines, but I think they're an extra playbook in 2nd ed now.
Yeah.
Driver hits all my buttons of charming rogue who has excess amount of baggage that is going to get explored in play.
Operator.
As I was saying, the Secret Feels game.
Right.
I'm not even a car person, but I will go car person just to play a driver.
That's great.
My favorite move is Reputation, which has also haunted a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games after the fact, because it lets you as the PC decide what NPCs are now important, and the MC is just going to have to deal with that shit.
Yeah. And if you're not familiar with the move, I mean, it's such a classic. You get to say, this person has heard of me. And that's, I mean, it's in 2 of my games. The Veteran in Urban Shadows has it, and the Sicaria in Cartel has it. And it's just an awesome way for a player to be like, yeah, you've heard of me. Like, you know me. Like,
of course you've heard of me.
Of course you've heard of me, right? I'm Star-Lord or whatever. Hey, sometimes you roll a miss, man. Sometimes you roll a miss.
You've revealed all my characters ever.
I'm Star-Lord.
If we were going expanded, I would have to say Brett's Faceless is my favorite of all the 2nd edition. There's something really, really powerful about that character because it looks like you're playing an almost comically powerful character, but there are some really evocative moves that dig into the core of what that character is about that you've made, and it's surprising. But going with core, like everybody else, sorry, I would go with the chopper. What's weird is like they have two moves, neither of which are them doing a thing. It's them dealing with their bunch of fuck-ups in their gang.
Right. It's like you don't want to roll the chopper's moves. Like there's one for like getting your pack in order. Like they should just fucking listen to you. Why do I have to make this move? Like it's not. It feels like the moves are bad for you.
Right. I don't want to do it.
PC, you want minions? Well, they all suck.
Yeah.
Oh, this is dumb, and it's not even like official in there, but like themed gang names are my catnip. I remember I had an entire gang, all of their names were hair bands from the 80s. Who doesn't want to deal with Winger trying to take over the band? Trying to take over the chopper. Like,
and the twins, Duran and Duran, yeah.
Right.
Yes.
But the chopper is real good at what they do. They've got a high hard, so yeah, their playbook moves aren't the kind of thing you want to trigger all the time, but they're real good at getting stuff done, and it's fun to play that person who doesn't care a whole lot about, people on an individual level. It's fascinating.
Make your move.
So beyond the playbooks, if you aren't familiar with Powered by the Apocalypse games, you often get a set of basic moves that everyone has access to. So, what is everyone's favorite basic move? Speaking for myself, I love Seduce or Manipulate because it addresses a lot of the issues people have with PC to PC social manipulation in a way that doesn't feel depowering to a target. As someone who likes playing PCs who tend to talk around people and mislead, I feel shitty as a player towards the other players. And this fixes the problem because the final decision of how your targeted PC reacts is in the hands of that player.
So brilliant.
They always have the ability to agree or disagree to go along with the suggested action. And there's some interesting narrative fluff you can get from the complications on both sides.
Yeah, I think it's such an amazing move for me because it says that the player gets to make a choice almost like as an author of their character. Mm-hmm. Yes, I will have my character's mind changed, or no, I will not. And it just completely undermines this idea of, well, that's what my character would do. It's like, no, your character's not real. They're not a real person. You, the player, are making that decision without also saying your character doesn't matter. Like, your character's not just a puppet. Like you're saying, you're going hard after another character, not their player. Mm-hmm. So the character also has to be real at some level. And I think Seduce or Manipulate is so wonderful. Ironically, although I rate games that are talky, the main thing that kills me about Apocalypse World is how good Seize by Force and Go Aggro are. So with Seize by Force, you're seizing something someone's holding, which could be their life or their position, but like you're going after them, whereas Go Aggro is you're going after what they're doing. You're like, you can't stay in this bar, I put a gun in your face. Or you can't kill that guy, he works for me, I put a gun in your face. And that clarifies intent about violence like nothing I've ever seen. Player says, I want to get this guy, I'm going to seize by force. I'm like, okay, why? And they're like, well, I don't want him to be here. Like, then that's going aggro. Like, you want to change his behavior. And like, that whole conversation has, I think, a very similar feel to what you're saying, Rach, about like, it just clarifies what we're doing here. You are making a choice about violence. You're making a choice about your character's manipulate or seduce outcome. Like, you're making these choices and they're so clear. And that was like such an eye-opener for me about how violence could look in games. Not just I check off a hit point, but like, oh, my behavior is changed. My position is changed. That's really cool.
It goes back to when I was bringing up violence and the content warnings and crystallize the stuff I wasn't quite sure if we had space to talk about there is, yes, it is a game about violence, but it's more complex than I shoot the thing and it dies. It's having a conversation about violence.
Are you willing to lose your life ensuring that it dies? Or are you trying to get it away from you because it's got like 17 mouths and a couple of tentacles and you don't want it to grab your best friend, who, by the way, you just pulled out of a smoldering hulk of wreck from the cannibals coming after you. Everything is within a context and you making decisions.
Matt J., what about you in basic moves?
I'm a fan of, both as a player and as the MC, of Rita Sitch. As a player, if I'm making that move, I want to fail that move. I want that move. I do,
What
right?
don't you see?
I still get to ask a question, right, if I fail. But again, I'm putting work on the MC about what he's going to do next or what she's going to do next. I want to play, right? And I want the MC to give me something. So as a player, I'm interested in failing that move. But it's also useful for me as a player. As an MC, I love that move because a lot of times folks will trigger it or they will say, hey, I'm doing XYZ. Can I roll read a sitch? And I may not have been thinking about anything, but the moment you say that to me and you're the player, that situation is now charged. I'm charging it now, right? It may have been mundane, boring, nothing, but when you say that and you're picking up the dice and you want to roll the dice, now it's charged. I don't know why, but we're going to figure it out. Because you're going to ask some things, right? And we're going to talk this out. You just made it charged by saying you want to check it out. That takes the game someplace I did not expect us to go.
Those moves are so powerful because I think they just structure that conversation. And for me as a GM, I realize I've sometimes gotten lazy because I'm just like, well, I'll describe details when players come to me. Those moves are so powerful that I'm like, yeah, let's roll the move and then I'll tell you what you see, right?
Yeah. So I'll say read a person. And this is very selfish, but I am terrible at GMing or playing mysteries, like revealing things slowly and doing hidden half-truths. I suck at it, and I get real angry when I'm playing at it. And I love read a person because I can just say, is this person lying? I have made the move. You have to tell me, MC, is this person lying? They're lying? Awesome. Because here's the deal. In Apocalypse World, the person lying isn't nearly as interesting as the player knowing that person is lying. What are you going to do about it?
Right.
I've gotten excited about non-Apocalypse World games where I will have an NPC say a thing, and then I, as the GM, will say, and they're lying.
And it's extremely clear to
Very
you
clearly.
that they're lying.
Oh,
Yeah,
they are
exactly.
so
Right.
lying.
Yeah, they're definitely lying. Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect prop for they're lying. What do you do?
Right. Well, there's an interesting thing from a design perspective that, Apocalypse World says, are you telling the truth as a question? Meaning that for the most part, people are lying all the time.
Mm.
The answer is it's not the baseline of everybody's telling the truth. It's actually, are you telling the truth is the odd question. So I think the game sets up a lot of really interesting ideas about lying to give you, like you said, Rich, the MC, the ability to say, yeah, he says he doesn't know where your friend went. Are you telling the truth? No, he's not telling the truth. He knows where your friend went. Are you going to do anything about it? And I think it gets to that, are you going to do anything about it faster than almost any other game I know?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Right, and also read a person gives you the ability to, okay, what do I think you're going to do next? What does your character intend to do? Right?
Right.
I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to run away.
You're just going to run away?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Similar to Rach, the seduce and manipulate, I love that you're like, what does your character wish I'd do? You could start off, read a person, have a conversation, read a person, get an idea of what they want, and then maybe you don't even have to seduce or manipulate if you know exactly what they want. And that's fun. That's some of that little sharp play that I've seen people use on my NPCs, and I'm like, oh man.
But going back to your early point about disliking mysteries in role-playing games, how does it feel as an MC when a player asks you, like, what does this NPC want me to do about that? Because isn't that revealing part of the mystery?
Oh, I never have a mystery. I never have a mystery on Run Apocalypse World.
Yeah.
Just throw things at the wall.
Oh, yeah, pretty much, yeah. What do people want right now? What would I want if I were this person from this background in this particular situation? Say that out loud.
Yeah. I think there's also a difference between mysteries and like puzzles, kind of like there are things in the world that are mysterious. Like, why is there a white elephant that walks around outside of town or whatever? Like, and then
Psychic
there's
Maelstrom.
Right, Psychic Maelstrom, right? But that's a mystery, but it's not a mystery like a puzzle that needs to be solved. Though, why did this person kill this person?
Right.
I think that one of the things that's cool about all these movies we've been talking about is they all work against other PCs.
Mm.
You can read another PC.
Right.
You can read a sitch another PC started.
Right.
And so it kind of treats all the actors in the space as having the capacity to change that space. And then it makes that the priority in the game. So if you have a mystery, I feel like you may have erred if that mystery is central to something happening, right? Which is how like a lot of Call of Cthulhu stuff is. Like if you say, my character goes home and goes to sleep because I've had a long day, then nothing happens in the game, I guess, until the GM has a deep one kicked down your door. But like the game's mechanics don't kick in. Here in Apocalypse World, you can't not do nothing because you can not do anything, I guess would be better. You cannot not do anything because you have to do something.
What I have run into is players that want a puzzle or mystery that I have not. Again, Apocalypse World, I'm jumping in cold with everybody else. I don't have a plot, right? I don't have a schedule. But some players do want to solve a mystery. And I cheat, right? If I'm listening and I'm paying attention from the beginning, they're asking questions. Sometimes other players will give answers, and I'm making notes. And I will reincorporate that stuff as we're playing along. And by the end of the game, they think they either figured out the mystery or they have not. And I'm getting kudos for having this great mystery, but I didn't do anything other than listen and reincorporate stuff. I didn't make a mystery, right? I'm like, you wanted to, it's Fantasy Island. You showed up and you wanted to be Sherlock Holmes, and I let you do that, right? And that was it. It wasn't a Sherlock Holmes story, but I let you do that thing, right? And you solved it.
That's awesome.
But I used the stuff that was there.
Yeah.
For the MC.
I think that's a good segue to start talking about Apocalypse World from the MC perspective. So for potential new Apocalypse World MCs, let's think about this for a bit and consider what types of stories does this game tell? It's a post-apocalyptic game. It's kind of got a different tone than the two extremes we addressed, but you put that game down, what type of story would you expect to come out of play?
I think for me, the thing that's so cool is that it is between those two tones. So you have this one side where folks are just like, where do they get their water? Where do they get their fish? Where do they get their gasoline? And that's like a thing that, you start to see these like really basic economic systems come into play, and then they can be disrupted, and their disruption is an immediate cause of concern. And then there's a bunch of weird shit, and that weird stuff is kind of aspirational. So in an Apocalypse World game, I used to, in almost every Apocalypse World game I ran for a long time, have this thing called the Wreck, which was just this like spaceship kind of thing that's out in the middle of the desert. And if you got too close to it, your gums started bleeding and you started hearing things. Why is it there? What is it doing? I don't know. We'll find out together. But like fish plus the Wreck. And that puts communities in a really tough spot because they're worried about their basic concerns. So not like zoning laws, but like whether we will eat next week. And they see this potential for the world to be remade or reborn or be revisited in some meaningful way. And your PCs are like caught between doing what they need to do today, which is what we call being a target. Like the GM has put a target on your back and you got to deal with it. And being an agent where you start to drive those changes. And I think Apocalypse World leaves people at the intersection of those two things, like Fury Road. You got to deal with all these cannibals / people wanting to kill you, but maybe there's hope. Maybe there's something better. That's such a cool intersection that I've only seen in this game.
What about you, Matt J? What do you think? What are the kind of stories you get out of a good Apocalypse World game?
For me, I think it's similar. It's the mundane plus the fringe. And walking through a day in the life of that, right? We've got regular concerns. Food, water, my kids. I'm an old guy, so I'm always adding kids into RPGs.
Love it.
Right? Well, what happens is, you get reactions from folks who have relationships in their real lives, whether they're parents or they're taking care of kids, whatever. And you don't have to put kids in danger. You just put them in the scene or put them in there somewhere. Apocalypse World is beautiful because you've got to name everybody, right? And so a lot of times I will, here's 3 kids. Those kids, name those kids. And I make someone else name them. So that's the buy-in, right?
You just gave Rich a sad, man. He would be like, I can't name these kids. I can't do it, Jay.
Don't worry, Rich. They're not going to be in peril. They're just going to have names.
But a lot of times I don't even do anything. They're just color.
They're just
but now you're worried, right? Because it's Apocalypse World. And like I said, we've got the mundane stuff, kids. But we got this fringe stuff. That Wreck, this space colony that's lost. I don't know, the Chopper and his gang acting up. Movies, so there are movies like Snatch, Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrels. That to me is very similar. You've got these dudes doing their regular thing. Their situation gets disrupted, and then everything just blows up after that, right? And it's normal, regular stuff. They're not trying to save the world. They're not trying to bring down some giant kingpin. I'm just trying to paying my rent this week. I'm just trying to get my guitar back. And then things just escalate from there. So I think in Apocalypse World, the MC controls how much things escalate. But things can snowball pretty quick, pretty fast, out of the mundane. So I usually start there because you've got all the fringe, all the supernatural, all the weird already, right? So you've got that juxtaposition to balance there.
Rich, what kind of stories do you see coming out of your Apocalypse World games?
To me, a great Apocalypse World game is setting up unstable situations and then seeing how the players react. Are they going to pull things apart? Are they going to try to build things up? And it's really putting everything in crosshairs. The way that moves snowball, that phrase means like move will lead to other move, and because of the mechanics, often it's a failure leading to a mixed success leading to a failure, so that things can go bad real quick. Coming in from other games to Apocalypse World, you really have to learn to put things in crosshairs and accept the fate of your precious, beautiful snowflake NPC that you stuck in their crosshairs of the PCs. And watching things break and evolve. And like Mark said, having that bit of hope out there is the kind of story the cycle that I see. Okay, now you've gone into a town. All right, you hate Millions. I don't know why, but Millions is always the dick heart holder in my games. Like, I don't know.
Just look at his name.
Millions.
And he's always got one lieutenant named Balls, because how can you have a good NPC named Balls? Yep. Like, the moment you introduce a guy named Balls, he's going to die.
He's going to die.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of when. He's a walking countdown clock, friends.
Yeah.
But watching Millions get taken down is so much more interesting than like throwing up these fences and gates and everything to take. Oh, now you have to take out the level 1 boss. Like, bump that noise, man. Millions goes down. Okay, great. The town is free?
Free.
Air quotes.
I ran a game at PAX Prime one time with a bunch of new players where the Heartholder was just a jerk, and one of the women playing the game had set up. She was like, oh, he wants me so bad. So I was like, all right, great, cool. So he calls you in. He's like, here's the deal. You either get with me or you get out. And the gunlugger who was there killed him. And that was like the rest of the game was the PCs trying to cover up that they just killed the Heartholder. Like, it was great. Yeah. They were like, you didn't plan any of that? I was like, how could I have planned that you would kill him? Right? Like, that's not, I can't plan your actions.
I'm just imagining the Apocalypse World version of Arsenic and Old Lace, where you just have like the Heartholder's body stuffed like underneath like the in some cabinet in like his house.
I'm not joking. They literally tried to move the body without getting seen by his savage like guards. They're like, oh, he's sleeping. And like all this seems funny, but it was like they understood that there were 50 people that were going to kill them. Right. Right. And like you're saying, Rich, I think it's like, it's not like, oh, like defeat these rats in the tavern and you can move up a level. Not that there's anything wrong. I mean, that kind of play is great for kind of gradually building up the story, but it's like, oh, this is our story now.
Right.
Weekend at Millions.
Yeah, like, that's it, right? Like, I couldn't turn it off if I wanted to. I'm on the ride, too. That's how I feel about it, for sure.
That's what I love about Apocalypse World, because those moments, they come out of nowhere, and now we're playing something different. Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the rest of you have really hit on the types of stories that I think the game produces. In my mind, if I were to like pitch it to someone who wanted to MC it, I'd be like, it's like an action movie, but you're also concerned about the tensions and the relationships between all the different characters, and there's a lot of space given to that. Because obviously in a good Apocalypse World game, you're going to want shit from each other. You can't do everything by yourself. You know, you have to be the gunlugger. You got to go make a deal with the Heartholder, and someone is going to annoy the other person, or to be completely honest, piss them off. And then we're going to spiral from there.
Yeah, like I love in Mad Max that you have basically, you know, Furiosa is the battle babe, Max is the gunlugger, and Nix is the driver, and they don't like each other.
Right.
But guess what they don't like more? Dying. So let's let's do this. Like, let's keep it moving, folks. Right. And I think that's an amazing kind of tension that you're describing, Rach, of we're in an action movie, so there's a lot of bullets and explosions and fun and jumping and chaos. But we don't 100% like each other, and not like in a buddy cop way, like in a I'm not sure we share the same values and interests.
Right.
And that's like real good tension.
Challenges to consider.
Cool. Let's talk about some challenges to consider while playing or probably running the game. I think that's an interesting thing for us. We've got these really rich, experienced MCs. So let's hit that. Rach, what are some challenges that you think folks should consider while playing or running this game?
Okay, I got a big axe to grind here. A lot of new players come to Apocalypse World with specific expectations about what the words post-apocalyptic mean. Two ways to describe this is what they thought the movie Road Warrior was about, and, if you will forgive me, the post-apocalyptic alpha male extravaganza. I have all the guns, look at me, I have all the guns. I hate it as a player, and it is absolutely unfun as an MC.
Yeah, it's so weird to me because it's so obvious that the game is interrogating that.
Yes.
Right? It's like people who are big fans of Walter White or Tony Soprano. It's like, did you watch the show?
Right, did you watch it?
Right, like, did you watch it? Because, like, Rick is not a hero. Like, that's like, come on, right? And I don't blame those pieces of art because I think that that's not their fault. I mean, they did a good. We all got it, so it's not that
Right.
complicated, right? Like, we're just regular people. But yeah, Rach, I guess part of it for me is like when you see this happening, do those folks ever get shaken out of it? Like, does the game do it, or do you feel like you have to go do it?
That's one of the reasons I dislike it as an MC, is it feels like it gives me extra things to do and take control of. And I try to put those players in positions where the one time I was thinking of when this happened, it was in a con game, and I had a player want to play a gun lugger who was a little bit out there, who was playing around with the idea of being a religious fanatic, which was kind of a problematic space, but I was okay to roll with it. And I brought that home to kind of tone it down by basically having his pamphlets appear throughout the world and come up as conversation starters.
That's cool,
Because
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
forced him to be social about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I end up dealing with it. You can tell at character gen if someone's leaning that way by
Right.
the amount of time they spend on certain details.
Right.
One challenge I recommend you consider is watching out for player characters that will hole up. What I mean by that is someone chooses to play a savvy head and doesn't leave their workshop. Someone plays a hocus, and for whatever reason, even though you as the MC have encouraged them, folks, to at least one of them to be part of the hocus's cult, no one does because they're all like, ooh, cult bad. And the player who chose it maybe didn't make their cult sound super appealing. So what are you going to do?
Right.
And then you've got a person who's just off in the corner doing their, hocus cult stuff. It can be cured. You can work around it, but be mindful of that. If you're nervous about it, maybe you curate the playbooks you put on offer.
Right.
Yeah, the idea of having an angel who's stuck in their infirmary and a savvy head who's stuck in their workshop is like a game killer.
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah. And the Maestro D, actually, I've had problems with the Maestro D, Mark. I know you love it, but like if nobody goes to your weird little cabaret for some reason, then you've got this huge cast of NPCs and it should be the happen and joy, and all the other stories are like other places. So do everything you can to bring folks together. Even as an MC, I've literally said, I'd like to see a scene between here, this person and this person. Why are you guys together?
Yeah.
And then just jump into it. That's how you can work your way out of it. Forget logic. Forget trying to wind the path of Billy and Family Circus to get these TBCs together. Just do it. Just slam them together, make the Reese's Cup happen.
I think that's the GM move, right? Or the MC move, right?
Put 'em together,
That's the
yeah.
skill.
Put them together.
Is reincorporating things and giving things meaning, right? Like taking relationships from one playbook or one character and tying them to somebody else. That's how you get folks to get into the bar. Maybe one of my Chopper members likes to hang out in the bar. And now I'm looking for my Chopper members, and I got to go to that bar to get them out. You start, as an MC, tying people's shit together so they're less scattered about. I think that's a MC skill, is to take all these different things and, like I said, give them meaning, because some stuff is just random and out there. You got to ground that stuff, and then you got to reincorporate that stuff over and over and over again to bring everybody together, because they won't. Players have their own playbook stuff going on. They've got their own concerns. And if you don't do that as an MC, you've got all these different directions happening and folks going a bunch of different ways. So I think that's the move as the MC, is to pull that. That's your job. Every conversation, every beat, you're retying that stuff together. That's what I feel like.
There's a thing there where Apocalypse World to some degree makes that easy, because there's only these 100 people, right? Like you don't have 3 million people living in a city and you somehow have to get the PCs in the same room. Like a PC can say, hey, there was a bunch of shots outside. Can I have heard those? You're like, yes, you can. Absolutely. Go outside and see them. Or even reverse it. Hey, you hear a bunch of gunshots because you live in the next tent from the person who just got shot. Right? And that's really easy. But there's also, I think you're pointing to a narrative coherence too that sometimes is lacking. Like you're the quarantine. So you came out of a pod post-apocalypse and are trying to get your memories back. This person's a chopper. There's actually nothing that necessarily links your stories. And if the location doesn't push you together hard enough, you can end up in this position where, yes, you're both existing in the same space, but you don't actually have any emotions about each other. And so there's this weird thing where like events are occurring, but none of them necessarily have any meaning and don't feel like they're a beginning, a middle, and end, because they're not fitting a common structure of like antagonist, conflict, end of conflict. Because just because there's a group of cannibals doesn't mean that they're interesting. And so I think what I've learned as a GM is that I should aggressively reincorporate and escalate. So, you know, the people who took the fish become a strike force, become a military invasion that's supposed to deal with the giant apocalyptic weapon that's in the lake that turned everything black. And that escalation fits Apocalypse World because it ties things together. Like then what the Hardholder's dealing with and what the Savvy Head are dealing with kind of comes together. And that's the thing, I don't know, Apocalypse World just requires more intensity to get there.
Rock on.
War stories.
We would like to end up this very first Take It Advanced episodes with a war story. And Mark, so you've got one that you wanted to share with us, a war story. That's it's not an actual story of war. Sorry, let me clarify.
I mean, it is Apocalypse World. It could be a story of war.
Sure, yeah. So I, obviously I do a lot of GMing, and my brother, who is not an indie gamer, like I love him, but he was, for his birthday, I was like, what'd you do for your birthday, buddy? And he's like, I played a bunch of 5e. And I was like, yeah, go you. He's not an indie gamer. So he calls me, he's like, hey, I'm over at my buddy's house, and they want to play a game. Do you want to run Apocalypse World for us? And I was like, Paul, it's 10 p.m. And he's like, yeah, well, we're all excited. Oh, man, fuck it. So I got my shit together, and I drove over to his buddy's house at like 10 p.m. And I was like, okay, we'll do this as long as we can do it, right? And there was like, I did have to kind of actively undermine, Rachel, what you're talking about. I'm going to play a tough hard holder, right, et cetera, et cetera. But like, we got there, and like, we're playing, and like, these cannibals show up, and they want a tribute, and they go back and forth, et cetera, et cetera. And the Maestro D, he had a stereo system. The only stereo system anybody had ever seen. So he would put on vinyl records and you would sit and listen to music, right? I just thought it was the fucking coolest thing, right?
Yeah.
After the apocalypse. So when it looked like the Hardhold was going to fall, he grabs up all his people and his most precious stuff and tries to leave and runs smack into the Hardholder, who just put down the people who were going to take the Hardhold from him. And my brother was playing this battle babe who was just constantly up in the Hardholder's shit, telling him he was doing a bad job, telling him he was wrong. And there's this moment where the Maestro D and the Hardholder are looking at each other, and the Hardholder goes aggro on the Maestro D and is like, you're not fucking going anywhere. And just rolls a 6. And the Maestro D is like doing his little dancey dance, like, yeah, like, screw you, man, I'm out of here, right? And like, these are mostly D&D players. Like, they don't go hard at each other very often. So this was like, everybody was like, is this happening? And like, it's just so great. And then my brother just switches sides. He's just like, that's right, I don't think you should go anywhere. And then rolls his help move and like hits it. And it was just like, oh, like in that moment where he switched sides, I was just like, you're all indie gamers now to me. Like you just between each other. But like it's funny, right? Because you asked me for war stories, and it actually made me think of as a player. I have actually one of the most touching moments I've ever had, which is my partner and Marissa don't play games together very often. But we did play this one game in which I was the touchstone. So I was like trying to make the world a better place. That's limited edition playbook. It's a little messy, but like you're trying to improve things. And she played the driver. And there was one time where like she tried to persuade me because she was in her car. She made it. And I was like, stupid car. And we're like kind of in a romance, but not really. And maybe there was a little bleed. And at the very end, we're on this island and her character constantly wanted to get off. And I was like, no, we need to make the island a better place. And then we realized the island was like fake. Like there was actually a world outside the island that might actually still be alive. And we faced this moment in which she like escaped to the sub to leave the island while I stayed behind to fight this gang of like weird zombies that came up. I had to like help her escape by like pressing our dead kid's like toy into her hands while she swam into the ocean. And then like, yeah, I'm like hard +3 with all these moves, but like that's a large gang and I know how these mechanics work. I'm in trouble. Mm-hmm. And like this moment where like I literally was like, I think I'm going to cry. Like this is so moving. So it's like, yeah, like that moment of like her being like, no, you have to come with me and rolling a persuade. And then me being like, no, interfering and hitting the move so that she could not persuade me. And then me persuading her and her missing on her help move and me basically forcing her to go by herself so that we would make it is like, how did this weird game about cannibals get here? It's amazing. So I have, yeah, I mean, for me, these war stories are like, I have these amazing stories just playing games with people and watching them be awesome. I have my own stories about being really moved by this stuff. Like there's something very raw about people trying to do their best when scarcity is what they're thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
One of the improvements, we're saying take it and advance is the style of this game, but then we realized that actually they're called improvements. But take it and advance. Something about improvement Apocalypse World didn't work quite as well, so take an advance on Apocalypse World.
Improvement. God, that's good.
One of the advanced improvements is retire your character to safety.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually retired a playbook. I love the Faceless, but in a play-by-post, I got an opportunity to play a Faceless, and one of the names choices is Orc. It was written for me, thank you, Brett. And so I named him Orc, and it was just a straight-on revenge story of the mask came to this person who's broken by this gang, and he's like working his way through and like savagely taking down each of the members, and then starting to have doubt and went with the whole like when he's not wearing the mask, there's all this stuff where you're weaker, and people will start to reach out to Orc outside of the mask. And so there was this battle between the duality of revenge and hatred versus forgiveness. And then at the end of the game, got to like the next to last person, not even the last person, next to last person begging for mercy. And it was just, he was done. Orc was done. And Lively put down the mask and walked away from it. And I realized as a player, like, this is the Faceless story I can't top. Like, every Faceless I could possibly play, I would only want to ape the story that I was participating in. This is it. And I've never played a Faceless since, and I just love that. Like, it's like I can't even stomach the idea of playing a different because it'd just be Orc. It'd just be Orc 2.0, and like Orc was so good. Right. Orc was good. I loved Orc. It was awesome.
That's how I feel about that touchstone. Like, I'm never gonna play that playbook.
Right.
Like, I'm never gonna have a moment like that with another player, and that be like, that's what's so cool about the game, I think, is you have this opportunity to mix and match. Like, when we do development for Apocalypse World, like, I once sat down and did the math. Like, I can't run enough sessions in my life to test every combination of Urban Shadows playbooks. It's not possible. So it's just constant innovation and reincorporation and excitement, and I love it. I think it's so cool.
For folks who are listening who want to find out more about what you do or to follow you on social media, Mad J, where can folks find you or find more out about what you're into gaming-wise?
Sure. I am on Twitter at MadJ0, or you can come on out to my website, madj0.com, or Diceology.com, where I run the Diceology podcast at.
Diceology is really good. For folks who haven't listened to it, there's some amazing interviews, some really, really solid AP. You might hear me on it once or twice, so, mileage may vary on whether it's really good all the time. But I'll highlight the Mike Pondsmith interview you did. God, it's so good. It's like NPR good, and to me, that's like
it is. It is a
so
really
good.
solid interview. Man.
I'll tell you what, and you can cut this if you want to. I was nervous as shit when
I can only imagine.
Right? For me, I played a lot of RPG games when I was young. Cyberpunk was one I picked up when it first rolled out. And it's a name on a book, Mike Pondsmith. I'm like, whatever, right? And I was playing. Somewhere along the line later on, I figured out that he's black. And then, like it was a lightning bolt in my head. There's a black game designer out there?
Yeah.
Really? I mean, I could do that? And so to meet him and do that interview, I was like, I've done by then 8 or 9 interviews. And I'm like, I'm going to fuck this up, right? I don't want to fuck this up, right? So he made that easy, right? It was easy to talk to him and have a conversation. He was cool as all. So that's, I loved that I got to do that.
That's awesome. Mark T.S. Truman, folks are thinking this guy might know what he's talking about these Powered by the Apocalypse games. How could they find out more about you and what you do?
I'm also on the Twitter at Trumonz, TRUMONZ. And you can find out most of our stuff at magpiegames.com. We have a beautiful new website that Marissa helped put together, and Hannah from Make Big Things helped us as well. So I'm really excited. It's super cute.
Nice.
And we have a bunch of cool things planned. I mean, it's funny to talk about this game because this is actually my job, and thanks to Vincent, I have a job doing this. So it's really weird for me to be like, here's things I love about this game that I now have written a half a dozen titles for because it existed. So, a lot of our work and definitely our most popular work is based around these ideas that Vincent put forward. And it's incredible. It's something I love coming to work and working on every single day.
Thanks, Rage, for being part of our Take in Advance on Apocalypse World, helping to shape up and create the outlines so we would have, a framework to talk about.
Structure, even though very important things were missing. Oops. We need an intro? Oh, no.
Thank you all. I mean, this is so cool for me as thinking about reflecting and critique and experience. And I think this is one of those things that it's great to see experienced people do, right? And so I think you two are, it's so cool to be here with you all and do this. It's like the benefit of getting old, right? Every time I'm old, right?
Yes.
It's
yes.
But we did get to do this reflective thing as opposed to just always thinking the future is now, right?
Right.
It's very cool.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you again for joining us, both of you, today.
Plus One Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Schelke. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at +1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for Plus One Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, Metal Version, and Hammer of Bill. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.
Hi listeners, I want to let you know about Codex Starlight 2, the newest issue of our indie role-playing game magazine, coming to the Gauntlet Patreon feed in early March. Codex Starlight 2 is one of the biggest and best issues yet, and it features Snipe Hunt, an original game inspired by movies like Red Dawn and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, in which a teenager takes a group of kids out into the woods for a snipe hunt in order to protect them from a calamity taking place in the town they live in. Bed, Breakfast, and Beyond, a one-shot hack of Brindlewood Bay about an elderly gay couple who run a bed and breakfast trying to figure out why guests keep disappearing from room 3. The Temple of the Peerless Star, a trophy gold incursion inspired by the dungeon made famous in the Discern Realities podcast and later published for Dungeon World in the original Codex Starlight. We've taken the core of that dungeon and expanded it for trophy gold, and it's great. 3 dozen more signs the stars are right, a miscellaneous sequel, 7 original illustrations, and a custom layout. You can get Codex Starlight 2 in the Gauntlet Patreon feed in March by making a $6 pledge. That's at patreon.com/gauntlet. Thanks.